Welcome to New Life Today. We are so glad that you have joined us. And listen, there is a lot of going on in the news right now with Israel. A week ago on Saturday, Hamas attacked Israel and launched an attack against them of the likes which has not been seen since, as even President Joe Biden said, since the Holocaust. And it is devastating. It's horrific. It's horrible. And we're going to talk just a little bit about Israel and Jerusalem in these segments. And so we want you to join us for that. And that's coming up right now. In Psalm chapter 83, we read of a coalition of nations that are going to come against Israel. And we're going to read about that in just a moment because it is a war that is that many Bible scholars believe will precede the Ezekiel 37-38 war that will transpire. Of course, during the time, it's a very famous war. It's Armageddon. Everybody knows it. Movies have been made about it. Books have been written about it. Messages have been preached about it. Bible prophecy conferences have been established around it. But this is a war that Bible scholars look at as well. But just before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Israel. I want to talk a little bit about Jerusalem. And I want to point just a few things out because a lot of people, with especially the rhetoric that's going on in our land today that is very troubling since this attack Saturday a week ago on the 7th in the early morning hours against Israel. We have seen in this nation, in America, which has ideally been pro-Israel since the Truman administration, when he just some 12 minutes or so after Israel declared themselves to be a state, he recognized them. And we've always been a pro-Israel for the most part. Our presidential administrations, our Congress, both houses of Congress, just people in general, the American people, those things are beginning to turn. We're beginning to see things. There's been demonstrations, horrible things, and I'm not against people exercising their right to to freedom of speech. There are some people out there that are. If you don't agree with them, then they want to shut your speech down. They want to stop you. But there are people that if you do not agree with them, they want to shut you down and keep you from speaking. And there's some terrible things that we're hearing, atrocious things that are hearing. And I'm not attacking their free speech, but I want to tell you what God says about Israel, because as believers, it is important for us to understand that, because there is also what is called replacement theology, which is found in many churches. And that's a very dangerous theology, and we'll do another segment on that and the dangers of replacement theology. But I want to point out something. When God made the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis, and he made the covenant with Abraham, in the 15th chapter, God takes him to the promised land. And I'm going to read a verse of scripture from Genesis chapter 15 here real quick. The scripture says this in Genesis 15, and as Abraham is there, he says to him, he gives him an understanding. He says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham. And behold, horror and a great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. Now he's talking about their captivity or their servanthood, their slavery in Egypt. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. And he says, now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation, they shall return here. And of course, some 450 years later, they did. For the iniquity, and this is what I want you to pay attention to, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So the Amorites were dwelling in the land of Canaan at that time. Now people say, oh, well, Israel took the land from the Palestinians, the Amorites. Actually, the Amorites were descendants of Noah's son Ham through Canaan. And so all of it originated through God's covenant people. Even with Noah, when Noah came off the ark, God made a Noahic covenant, and he promised that he would not destroy the earth anymore for man's sake, and that he would not curse the ground any longer for man's sake. And so Noah makes covenant with God, and he repopulates the earth. His family repopulates the earth. Remember, 8 souls saved in the ark through the flood, out of the flood, away from destruction. And so out of Noah's sons, out of Ham specifically, comes Canaan, comes the Amorites, comes the people who dwell in the land. Now these were people who knew God. Noah knew God. He walked. The reason why Noah was chosen is because he was a righteous man. He preached righteousness. He was an upright man. He instructed his family in righteousness. He instructed his family in the things of God. And so God saved that family, placed them there. But as man's heart of depravity is prone to do, it fell. And so because of the egregious, godless acts of these descendants in the lands, idolatry, immorality, to extents that we don't even understand, sacrifices that we don't even understand, God finally said, well, there will come a day that their iniquity will be fulfilled. And so God makes a promise to Abraham. He says, I'm going to give this land to your descendants. Now, one of the things that we got to remember is that God, as the creator and the originator of this world and all that is therein, all things are created by him and for him, and they are created for his pleasure. The scripture says that all things belong to God, that he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns the gold and the silver that are underneath those hills, that the heavens and the earth belong to God, but he gives them unto the Son of Men. So he leases them out. He leases his land out to them, and we are to abide by the rules of the owner. And when we don't abide by the rules of the owner, we get evicted from the land. And that's what Israel did with these individuals that turned their back on God, is they were evicted from the land, just as God had told Israel. He said, if you do the abominations of the nations that I am putting out before you, he said, then you'll lose your right to the land. And that happened. They went into captivity, but God had made a covenant with them that he would bring them back to this land, because he made a covenant with those people. And so when he made a covenant with those people, they have a covenant with God, and they have a covenant with the land, because God's covenant is with that land. And what it really boils down to is it boils down to the fact that that people, it's not that people just hate Israel. It is that people also, they hate the God of Israel. Because in Psalm chapter 83, the writer, who is Asaph, spells out exactly how these individuals feel about not just Israel, but feel about the God of Israel. There's a verse of scripture in Amos chapter 3 and 7, and that says this. It says, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. Now that is important for us to understand in this chapter, Psalms chapter 83, because Asaph is writing, who was David's worship leader. He is writing this psalm, the 83rd Psalm. But in Second Chronicles, the scripture tells us in Second Chronicles 29 and 30 that Asaph is also what the Bible referred to as a seer. We would know him more as a prophet. And when you deal with prophets in the Bible, you deal with two types of prophets. You deal with those who see, and you deal with those who hear. There are those who hear the word of the Lord, and then there are those who the word of the Lord came unto them in a vision. And the scripture clearly bears out how these prophets heard from the Lord. They heard either with their spiritual ear, they heard in their spirit, that place where only the Spirit of God can speak to, or they saw something in the Spirit. They were taken beyond the physical vision, the physical vision field of what they could see. It is really kind of like the drapes of a window being pulled back and being able to see now what is outside that the drapes cover up. And so they're pulled back and you have a clear vision. And so you find that Asaph is what the scripture refers to as a seeing prophet. So when Asaph writes this psalm, he writes this psalm from the perspective of seeing beyond where Israel was at that present day. Let me give you just a couple of things here that is important for us to understand. David had decisively triumphed over Israel's enemies, and Israel was able to freely expand their landmass since the superpowers of Egypt and Assyria were both in decline. Now, one of the things that is important to understand is that God made a promise with Noah. He said to Noah, he said, in blessing, I'll bless you. In cursing, I'll curse them who curse you. In those who bless you, I'll bless. Those who curse you, I'll curse. And so what God was saying there, in essence, is he was saying, whatever they do to you, that's what I'm going to do to them. However they bless you, I'm going to bless them. However they curse you, I'm going to curse them. And so David, now Egypt is in decline, Assyria is in decline. These are nations that are trying to destroy Israel. Now, of course, Egypt had subjugated and brought Israel into captivity and into poverty. And it is when God made the promise to Abraham and said unto him, your descendants will be, they'll serve another for, 400 years. In the fourth generation, they'll come out. And when they come out of that land, they'll come out with great possessions. And the night that Israel left Egypt, they bankrupted Egypt. And from that day forward, Egypt has never rebounded. It has been a very poor country and has lived in poverty for a very long time. And why is that? Because God said, what you do to Israel, that's what I'll do to you. When Babylon decided to destroy and raze Jerusalem completely to the ground, the city of Babylon no longer exists. When Persia, which is now what we know as Iran, but until 1937, it was known as Persia, when Cyrus allowed people to go back to Jerusalem, and he let a remnant go back to Jerusalem, God said, I will leave a remnant for you. And so we have that remnant known as Iran today. When Greece took them and tried to interject their religion into everything, then what ended up happening is the religion of Judaism ended up infiltrating Greece. When Greece fell, it began, instead of the Greek culture overtaking Judaism, Judaism overtook the Greek culture. If you don't believe me, just read your New Testament scriptures and find out what happened in Corinth, find out what happened in Macedonia, find out what happened in Ephesus, find out what happened in all of these great Greek centers. And then when Rome dispersed everybody, 70 AD, they dispersed everybody all over the land, all over the known world. At that time, when Rome fell, Rome got dispersed all over the world. That's the reason why most of your languages have some type of a Latin base to them, is because they got dispersed all over the world. So when the scripture says, what you do to Israel, I'll do to you, that's what God means. He says, what you do to them, I'll do to you. And keep in mind, that means however vicious, however destructive, however evil your actions are towards Israel, it's going to be repaid like coals of fire heaped upon your head. And it's just the way that God has made a covenant with his people. And when it comes to the land, you can't separate the people from the land. And that is what we're going to deal with in our next upcoming video, is we're going to deal with this 10-nation federation that's trying to come together in Psalm 83 and try to erase the name of Israel from under heaven. And so you'll want to make sure that you keep in tune. Listen, the best way to do that is to give us a thumbs up. Like this channel, share the content of this channel, give us some comments. Let us know the comments. Hit the bell. That way you're alerted every time we begin to put more content on. Help us get the word out right now. We want to get the word out and the information out. It's free. You don't have to go and subscribe. There's a lot of places that subscribe. I don't know. Maybe down in the future we might have opportunities for people to subscribe and to help, or not subscribe, but to become members and help. I don't know. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. But as of right now, it's free, and you're able to share this content. It's no charge to you. We just ask for you to help us and help us get the gospel message of Jesus Christ out. Let people know they can have a new life today. You can help us do that. We'll see you soon in another video. Thank you very much.